It's often said that winter fights with Russia, and that General Winter is Russia's best friend. And with Russia's long and complicated military history with winter, many people have suspected that Russia will launch some kind of winter offensive in 2022 or early 2023. And while this may be true and there is some evidence suggesting that, Russia may also be planning something much more complicated. One thing that's known to everyone is that Russia will eventually go on the offensive. But in this video, we're going to be discussing two of the most likely offensive maneuvers Russia will launch, and either one should likely happen. But before we jump into this video, stop this video right now and subscribe to this channel. That way you're not missing out on any new updates we have coming at you. You'll avoid the bias of modern media, and you'll get access to fast, detailed analysis about major global events in today's world. Be sure to hit that notification bell. That way you're not late to a single update. Without further ado, let's jump into this video. With the recent massive Russian missile attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, particularly Ukraine's energy resources, many people have suspected that Russia is trying to freeze the Ukrainians into submission. And many people have also suspected that Russia is using this to prepare for the winter offensive. In other words, Russia will supposedly launch this winter offensive after Ukraine's energy resources have been severely depleted or destroyed. The logic behind this supposed Russian military maneuver is to freeze the Ukrainian population into submission, causing morale to drop and attempting to break their will to fight, while also putting extreme pressure on the Ukrainian government, as it is likely that there will be some degree of protest and civil unrest. As this is going on, Russia will also supposedly launch some kind of winter offensive with the extra troops from Putin's partial mobilization in an attempt to break the Ukrainians militarily and mentally. In other words, obliterate them on the battlefield and destroy their morale. And this idea of a Russian winter offensive is not something some random person came up with. First of all, if we examine Russia's history with winter, they have a very complicated history with winter, and the Russians are known for using winter to their advantage. So it makes sense that they launch some kind of winter offensive, especially considering Putin's partial mobilization seemed to happen right before the winter. And although many people have attributed this to Russia's horrific defeat at Kharkiv, the timing of this mobilization still means something. However, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg seems to have a different idea, and let me explain it. According to what NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said, Russia is actually planning to launch some kind of spring offensive. Let me quote NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. He said this, and I quote, "What we see now is that Russia is actually attempting to try to have some kind of freeze of this war, at least for a short period of time, so they can regroup, repair, recover, and then try to launch a bigger offensive next spring." And although the popular opinion right now is that Russia will launch a winter offensive, there is a significant degree of evidence for a Russian spring offensive. And the first piece of evidence comes from President Putin's mouth. Putin told Russia's Human Rights Council that 150,000 of the 300,000 troops recently mobilized are currently being deployed to Ukraine. Putin said 150,000 are in the zone where special military operations are being carried out. And then Putin goes on to say this: out of these 150,000 in formations, only half, that's 77,000, are directly in combat units. The rest are the second, third lines performing the duties, in fact, of territorial defense troops or undergoing additional training in the operation zone. Even if Putin is remotely telling the truth, his statements seem to provide evidence of a Russian spring offensive. Let me explain. If only half of the 300,000 recently mobilized troops are actually in Ukraine, being 150,000, that is in no way enough troops to launch any massive, meaningful offensive. And to complicate matters even more, only 77,000 are directly in combat units. The rest are performing other duties and allegedly undergoing additional training. Now here's the thing, you don't just throw 150,000 troops into combat when only half of them are in combat units. It doesn't take a Sun Tzu to figure this out. It's a basic war concept. Your soldiers must be organized in effective combat units. That way your operation could go smoothly. If you just send 150,000 men in random formations in an offensive, they could very easily be routed, destroyed, or surrounded. If you don't believe me, go examine the early phase of Operation Barbarossa, when German troops obliterated Soviet army after army due to the Soviet Union's lack of preparation and in many cases disorganization. And if your army is seriously disorganized, you invite failure to your military camp. So we have two pieces of evidence for the Russian spring offensive. First of all, Putin's comments, which seem to basically say that Russian forces are not prepared for an offensive right now, at least a significant one. And then also, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said, the third piece of evidence goes back to Russia's history. If we look at why Russia and General Winter seem to have this military connection, it's only because Russia uses winter to their advantage. Now here's the thing, currently in Ukraine, a Russian winter offensive may not be in their best interest, because a winter offensive may end up annihilating many of Russia's already severely battered units. Also, it could put a strain on Russian supply lines. And many people have been saying, well, it's going to become very hard for Ukraine to launch any offensive during the winter. Well, I'd say the same thing for Russia. In fact, it may be even harder for Russia to launch an offensive during this winter. In fact, Ukraine may be in an even better predicament for any winter offensive than Russia. Because if the figures are correct, Ukrainian troops severely outnumber the Russians. And anytime the Ukrainians lose troops, they can just send new ones in. While many of the Russian soldiers are still battered and severely depleted. So a winter offensive seems to favor Ukraine more than it would favor Russia, and therefore it is likely that Russia is trying to use the winter to freeze the conflict, giving them time to recover and regroup their units for an attempted knockout offensive this spring. And with this information, I think that evidence points more to a Russian spring offensive than to a winter one. But we'll see what happens. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel and smash that notification bell. That way you're not missing out on any updates we have coming at you. With major global events happening every single day, you don't want to miss out on any new updates. Subscribe to this channel and share this video with a friend. Stay tuned for the next video. God bless you, and I'll catch you next time.